All right, according to my watch, it's 11 days until the AP government exam. And if you have not ramped up your review yet, let's get going. So there's tons of resources out there. I've shared ones yesterday on documents. I'll share more on cases and unit reviews. But what about legislation you should know? Like key legislation, key laws passed by Congress that you should know. Now, obviously, when you go through your notes unit by unit, you should come upon these. But if you just want to sort of take a separate moment to go over some. Here we are. So I'm going to do these chronologically. So 1939, we have the Hatch Act. That's our friend, maybe he's our friend, Senator Hatch there. And this was an act to prevent pernicious political activities. We just call it the Hatch Act. And it basically says if you work for the government, you're a civil service employee in the executive branch, um, besides like the president and vice president, you can't engage in some forms of political activity, right? It tried to end corruption. And there is actually different levels. Like if you're in the military, that's not to say you can't like have any political involvement as a citizen in a town you might live in, right? But they want to make sure that they're not saying like, hey, if you work for me, you better vote this way. Or if you do this for my campaign, maybe you'll get this job. It was trying to prevent all that sort of stuff. Um, we went over this a lot, the Civil Rights Act of 1964. We talked about the 60s a lot. The 50s, right? All of this civil rights, whether it's Brown v. Board, letter from Birmingham jail, right? Keep reviewing all these things. This is a landmark Civil Rights Act. It took years and lots of blood, sweat, and tears to pass. It basically took the assassination of President Kennedy to finally get the momentum for LBJ to sign this. And it outlawed any discrimination that was based on race, color, religion, sex, national origin. So you couldn't be denied housing because of your race or a job because of your sex, with parameters to things, but basically banned most discrimination. Soon thereafter was also the Voting Rights Act, another thing that was in the works for a long time. This basically tried to enforce, if you will, the 15th Amendment, right? The 15th Amendment said Black men the right to vote. Now, of course, we also have the 19th Amendment with women, but there were still many intimidation methods that were put in place to try to prevent people from voting, whether it was poll taxes, which is also outlawed right around 1964 with that amendment, or citizen like literacy tests and all these sorts of things. So it tried to, or this act outlawed that kind of discriminatory voting practices. And I should have mentioned also with the Voting Rights Act, right, how this was really used to address all the Jim Crow laws that still existed, especially in the South after the Civil War, right? All those Jim Crow laws that said, hey, Plessy versus Ferguson, separate but equal, said it's okay. This act said, no, this is not okay. Title IX, this was part of the Education Act of 1972. Title IX dealt with gender discrimination in schools, and we normally refer to it gets most attention because of sports. If you look through some old high school yearbooks from before this time, you might see tons of boys playing sports and then like maybe one or two, if you're lucky, things for females, maybe none, right? So that's an example of funding that wasn't equal. So they said funding had to be equal for everything in education, but sports was the main way it was not being used equally. War Powers Act. Heck, we also learned a lot about Vietnam this year, whether it's New York Times versus United States, Tinker v. Des Moines. Well, keep in mind, this was not declared war by Congress, but as commander in chief, most of these actions were happening. So this act by Congress basically limited what a president as commander in chief could do. So you see this as checks and balances, right? An example of the way Congress could try to check the powers, which are still established as commander in chief, some powers in the Constitution. And you see here like some of the parameters. Congress can pass a resolution that says, hey, bring those troops home. Or if you send troops for something, you have to make sure Congress knows, within 48 hours, things like that. National Voter Registration Bill. We just did the Motor Voter Act in Unit 5 moments ago to try to increase voter turnout and political participation, right? So the idea is that when you signed and you got your driver's license, which many of you guys are doing soon, you would also be registered to vote. The Patriot Act, we know this is 2001 and after, and there are variations of the Patriot Act. No, this is a response from 9/11. There's President Bush signing it, and it was to deter and punish terrorist acts in the United States and around the world, to enhance law enforcement investigatory tools and other purposes, which include so on and so forth. Now, some of them have since been removed if they felt like it violated privacy rights or certain freedoms of speech or so on. There are other acts you should know, right? Maybe they'll ask you a question on American with Disabilities Act or McCain-Steingold, right, with Citizens United. But so you may see these in multiple choice questions. Sometimes if you don't remember, maybe it's an infographic or something you can work your way through. But also, this is information you could also use in FRQs when you have to use one from this list, bring something else up. Maybe you're like, oh, this relates to the War Powers Act of 1963 or the Voting Rights Act of 1964. This could also be information that you can introduce if you feel that it fits. All right. Keep reviewing, people. Know your Constitution. We got this.